2014, Sir Alex Ferguson called Michael Carrick the best English player in the game. The world laughed. By 2026, Carrick had beaten Pep Guardiola and Mikel Arteta in his first 2 games as Manchester United manager. Nobody was laughing anymore. But here is what nobody is telling you. This was never a surprise.
Great play. Plays it back to Carrick. He finds Park. Up against Boomer here. It's Michael Carrick! Yes! His first Manchester United goal on his 26th appearance!
Ferguson saw it coming over a decade ago, and the clues were hidden in plain sight the entire time. This is the untold story of the quietest man in football, and how he became the answer to the biggest question in the sport. Let us go back to the beginning. Because to understand what Carrick is doing right now at Manchester United, you first have to understand what Manchester United became without him. Ferguson retired in 2013, and what followed was not just a decline. It was a collapse of identity, a decade of chaos dressed up in different accents and different philosophies, none of which ever truly fit. David Moyes came in and United played cautious, fearful football that had no business wearing the red of Manchester. Louis van Gaal arrived with his obsession for control without soul, passing the ball sideways in front of 60,000 confused supporters who had paid to watch one of the greatest clubs in football history. Then came Jose Mourinho and his siege mentality, a manager who treated Old Trafford like a fortress to defend rather than a stage to conquer. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer brought the emotion but not the structure. Ralf Rangnick brought the structure but not the connection. Erik brought both briefly, before everything unravelled, and then came Ruben Amorim, whose chaotic 3-4-2-1 experiment left United looking like a team that had never played football before. Players stranded in wrong positions, midfield exposed, Bruno Fernandez drifting between 3 different roles in the same match without a single reference point to anchor him.
Hopeless in the system. They've been absolutely hopeless.
You know, he's playing 3-5-2, it isn't working. Good managers change.
Being a manager like that in terms of the system that he played, I don't think ever really suited the club of the traditions of Manchester United.
13 years. 13 years of managers trying to rebuild Manchester United in their own image. And every single one of them failed. Then Michael Carrick walked back through the door. And something extraordinary happened. The results came first. They always do. That is what gets the headlines. But the results were not the story. What happened against Manchester City in Carrick's first game in charge was not luck, was not chaos, was not the new manager bounce that journalists reach for when they cannot explain something properly. You want to know what you are actually watching? You are watching the Ferguson Code being rebooted. Here is what you need to understand about Ferguson that most people get completely wrong. Everyone talks about Ferguson's passion, his hairdryer treatment, his incredible winning record. But passion was never the foundation of what he built. Control was, specifically the kind of quiet, deep, structural control that you only notice when it is gone. Now here is the part that will change how you see this entire story. When Michael Carrick was approaching the end of his playing career at Manchester United and the club was considering his transition into coaching, they gave him a detailed psychological assessment, a questionnaire designed to reveal his true character and his natural working style. The results were extraordinary. The assessment concluded that Michael Carrick is a helpful, patient, stable person who works steadily and consistently, even-tempered, communicating and teaching in a patient, detailed, non-threatening way. It said he prefers having and following a well-thought-out process to ensure success, and that if he is responsible for establishing that process, he will do so in a thoughtful, methodical manner, paying close attention to detail and time-honoured successes. Read that again. Patient, stable, process-driven, methodical, non-threatening. That is not just a description of a good coach. That is a description of Ferguson himself. The same qualities that made Ferguson's dressing room function for 26 years were sitting dormant inside one of his own midfielders the entire time. Ferguson knew. Of course he knew. That is why in 2014, when the media were calling Carrick boring, when fans were questioning whether he was even good enough to play for a top club, when England were ignoring him despite him being arguably the most technically accomplished central midfielder in the entire country, Ferguson looked at all of it and said Michael Carrick is the best English player in the game. Not the most exciting, not the most physical, not the most decorated, the best. Because Ferguson did not watch football the way supporters watch football. He did not follow the ball, he followed the decisions. But here is the thing that makes this story even more remarkable. When Carrick went into management, he did not go to a big club immediately. He went to Middlesbrough. He took a club going nowhere and turned them into a promotion-chasing side. He did it quietly, he did it without drama, he did it without the resources or the reputation or the noise that surrounds most big-name managerial appointments. And when Manchester United called him back in January, not as the permanent manager, not with a long-term contract and a massive budget, but as interim head coach until the end of the season, he walked back in with the same calm, the same clarity, and the same unshakable sense of purpose that he had carried throughout his entire career. He did not try to reinvent Manchester United. He did not arrive with a tactical TED talk or a revolutionary system that nobody had ever seen before. He looked at the squad he had inherited, assessed their strengths and their weaknesses with complete clarity, and made 3 fundamental changes that transformed everything immediately. First, he scrapped the chaotic 3-4-2-1 formation entirely. Gone. Finished. The system that had turned United into something unrecognisable, with wing-backs disconnected from the midfield outnumbered in transitions, and attacking players drifting without reference points, was replaced with a 4-2-3-1 that functions like a 4-4-2 without the ball. Simple, logical, perfectly matched to the personnel available. Second, he restored the midfield spine. Before Carrick, Casemiro was being asked to do the impossible, covering enormous amounts of ground both sideways and vertically, essentially doing the job of 2 players on his own while aging rapidly and running on empty. Carrick placed Kobbie Mainoo alongside him and divided the responsibilities cleanly. Casemiro protects space and controls tempo. Mainoo provides mobility and progression. Suddenly United had balance in the middle of the pitch again, something they had been missing for years. Third, and most crucially of all, he fixed Bruno Fernandez. Under the previous regime, Bruno had been asked to operate as a 6, an 8, and a 10, all in the same game, essentially solving chaos for a team with no structure. Under Carrick, Bruno is a pure number 10 again. He sits between the lines, receives the ball facing forward, activates the runners around him, connects the midfield to the attack, with the kind of precision and timing that makes him one of the best playmakers in the world when he is used correctly. The system now feeds his strengths instead of asking him to compensate for everyone else's weaknesses. Those 3 changes alone transformed Manchester United from a team that looked lost to a team that looked organised, competitive, and genuinely dangerous. And the only question left, the one that will be answered in the weeks and months ahead, as United push for Champions League football and Ineos decide who leads this club into its next era, is whether the people with the power to make the decision permanent are smart enough to see what Sir Alex Ferguson saw all those years ago. Because if they are not, if they look past the quiet man again in favour of noise and reputation and the next big name, then history will record it as one of the greatest mistakes this football club ever made. Football has a way of humbling the arrogant and rewarding the patient. Michael Carrick has been patient his entire life, and right now, at Old Trafford, it looks very much like his time has finally, quietly and completely arrived.